Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today we are going to be sitting down and having a candid discussion about the state of games, X-Wing and Armada, with regards to the recent interview with Will Schick. By now, I am sure that many of you have had the time to sit down and watch the interview that Will Schick gave to the channel. This went live Monday. I'll put a link in the video description below so you can check that out as well. If you do have the time, it's about an hour and 45-minute interview. It went a little long, and I think there's a lot to be gleaned. But I want to address some concerns, a lot of comments that have showed up in the comment section along various social media channels and Discords as well, and give you my takeaway as I have now had time to process and react to the answers and to the content of the interview, and I'm sure a lot of folks will be giving their takes on it as well. I think it was actually a pretty good interview, and that's, of course, I'm a little biased because obviously I conducted it, but at the same time, I wanted to make it a point to talk about all of the games that AMG does, despite a landscape in which most of their focus has been on Legion and Marvel Crisis Protocol and Star Wars Shatterpoint. I wanted to make sure I dedicated some time to talk about Star Wars Armada and Star Wars X-Wing, and sort of having a pretty good idea in advance that there probably wasn't going to be a whole lot to be able to talk about. Now, that being said, there still was, I think, some valuable information that came out of that, although my definition of valuable information and your definition of valuable information might be different. And that's kind of where I want to talk about. The topic of this video today is what did we really learn from this interview, from what was put out. So that's where we're going to focus on. If you guys are new here to the channel, I do talk a lot about Star Wars tabletop games and a lot of other tabletop games in general. It's not all Star Wars. Sometimes it's Star Trek, sometimes it's Cyberpunk, sometimes it's Marvel, sometimes it's something new altogether. But I love tabletop games. Usually those games that have miniatures, I tend to focus on. So would love to have you stick around. We are doing a $25 Amazon gift card giveaway right now. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. Plus, you can keep the discussion going by jumping in our Discord. We're having a painting competition going on right now with an inner city theme, although you can submit any kind of painting you want in there. And all kinds of fun stuff happens in the Discord. You can also check out Crabbok.com and all the other links that are going to be in the video description below. With that said, I want to go ahead and jump into this video. So I'm going to give you the TLDR, sort of the summary, the abbreviation for both X-Wing and Armada, and then we'll kind of dive into them a little bit differently. First off, there's not a whole lot of information that was put out. Basically, the long and the short of it is that AMG says when they have something to say, they're going to say it. That's the long and the short of it. And that's kind of saying the part that maybe a lot of people already knew. Maybe we already expected that. Maybe we didn't expect to have anything new like, hey, surprise, this is coming. Surprise, you're getting a points update. Surprise, Rapid Reinforcements 3 and 4 are coming. Surprise, there's new ships. Surprise, there's a new campaign. Stuff like that would have been super exciting, and we didn't get that. We got told, when we have something to say, we'll say it. And while that's probably initially frustrating to a lot of folks, I know I was less than happy with getting those kind of answers. I think having some time to reflect on that it gives a little bit of context to maybe where Armada is right now, maybe where X-Wing is right now, and so I think it's a time to talk about that, because I think we can gain some things from what wasn't said and from how things that were said were actually stated. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about is that there's no lack of empathy or malice or basically AMG's not staying quiet on these games because they're getting a kick out of being quiet, or they're not being quiet on these games because they want to. And I think there's a lot to unpack with that statement. For one, it means that they would like to actually be able to give us a more concrete update. And something's holding them back. Now, we don't know what that is. I'm going to speculate on that in a moment. But the point is, something's holding them back. And what that tells me, again, I like to read between the lines a little bit. If something's holding them back from saying something, that means there's something to be said that they just cannot currently say. If they had nothing to say, then they wouldn't be waiting for like approval, or there wouldn't be any kind of like pending announcements. Once we have the green light, we can go ahead and say X, Y, or Z, or announce X, Y, or Z, or make this, make the scheduling update for mini extravaganza or something like that. So while, initially it might sound bad, to me, one takeaway from that is perhaps there's something good on the horizon. And again, we may have different definitions of what is good. So let's talk about that. What could be on the horizon that might be good? Obviously, the biggest thing that could be on the horizon that could be good is, hey, we've got approval from Lucasfilm, we've got approval from Asmodee, or whatever. We've got a new stuff that we're hiring new developers, and we're gonna bring production for these games back into the mainstream, back in line with where we think where they should be. That would be probably great news for a lot of folks. I'm sure the majority of you out there would love to hear something like that. We're bringing on some experts, or maybe we've brought back some folks who used to work on these games, and now they're contracted to come back and work on these games, or I know at least in one or two cases, some of the developers who've worked on X-Wing and or Armada are back at other Asmodee companies right now. So theoretically, something like that isn't outside the realm of possibility. So that would be pretty interesting. But there's other types of announcements that it could be. I mean, again, we're getting into speculation right now. And I'm speculating because I'm going to ask you guys, how you would feel about these things. There could also be bad news, like, hey, we have to announce that, perhaps something like, well, Armada is going to sunset, where it will, this will be the last Worlds, and then there'll be no more OP support, and, basically we'll be dropping the game. That, a lot of people would see that as potentially bad news, but on a certain hand, there would be an edge of finality. We wouldn't be wondering what's the status anymore. It'd be official. It would be over. And then, at that point, it might be time for the community to come together and have some type of continuing committee where basically all the community leaders kind of, join forces and throw their support behind, some type of homebrew initiative, maybe get some former developers on board, and try to maybe release homebrew expansions and things like that. I know there's a lot of like small little homebrews that have creeped up, but I don't, give any credit to any of that because of the fact that the game is still currently supported. So like, what's the point of saying like, oh, here's my Lucre Hulk, when maybe they'll come out with a Lucre Hulk, and then all of a sudden now there's, I feel like stuff like that can be really fun in small play groups, but if you try to introduce it to like a larger meta, you're going to add more confusion. So considering my platform and where I'm at, I don't really discuss any of that homebrew stuff, even though I've done some homebrew because it's fun too. It's a hobby of mine, but realistically, like promoting it in front of a large audience, there's no reason to kind of get homebrew going right now on that kind of scale, because I feel like it's just gonna confuse things. But if the game were to finally officially sunset, then I would definitely throw my support behind getting a community initiative going or something like that at some point. Maybe not like the same day, because I probably want to give it about a month, to see if it was going to transition to another company, which is a good segue into another option. What if, for example, games like X-Wing and Armada were to transfer back to Fantasy Flight Games? The games that started them, the studios that started them. There's not a whole lot of reasons to say why it couldn't happen. I initially, the miniatures games were moved to AMG for consolidation because the company was being sold. Well, the company's already been sold. It's not getting ready to get sold again, so there's no reason that they couldn't restructure and put games back under familiar territory. Or it wouldn't even have to be necessarily AMG. It could go to some other company like Z-Man Games or another studio that, wherever they think is appropriate. But it would be interesting, and I think it would be a positive sign if those games were able to be moved to a studio that A, wanted them, and B, had the capacity to support them, whether that's because they have some existing developers on staff or it's because they have miniatures already. I mentioned Z-Man games because then they already released like a Pandemic, a Star Wars version of Pandemic, like Star Wars Clone Wars Pandemic. That game happened to have miniatures in it. So it's not like Atomic Mass Games is the only company under Asmodee that's allowed to do Star Wars games, and it's not like they're the only company that's allowed to do games that have miniatures. Atomic Mass Games' specialty seems to be in the hobby miniatures side, which caters to games like Marvel Crisis Protocol, Shatterpoint, and Star Wars Legion, but doesn't really cater to games like X-Wing and Star Wars Armada. So I could totally see X-Wing and Armada being a natural fit under a different studio that might cater a little bit more to miniatures games that aren't hobby miniatures games. And then on another note, there's also the possibility of, and this one's kind of a little far out there, of maybe redoing these games somewhat. I joked a little bit, and I'll explore this again in a future thing. But what if games like X-Wing and Armada didn't actually have the ships on? What if they were just cardboard games? What if you took the same engine and you just did cardboard? You could still play them the same. Now, obviously, there's a base, so the game would change a little bit. There'd be a few millimeters difference for ship movements and things like that. But largely, if you played them with just the cardboard bases, obviously you'd lose the theme of the game. But the mechanics would still largely be the same, minus that few millimeters of difference when it comes to movement, because those bases have notches in them and things like that. Armada might be a little different because you wouldn't have the shield's dials, but if you had like tokens or something like that to track them on the ship card, you could still mechanically do a lot of the same stuff. And that would be an interesting way to kind of take these games forward. And that's probably something I'll explore in a future video, just out of like theory crafting. Like, what if, they decided to kind of relaunch X-Wing or Armada as like a cardboard game that had optional miniatures. Like, you have just your base, and if you want to go ahead and bling out your game by putting miniatures on top of the cardboard, you can do that also, but it would make it cheaper from a studio standpoint just to produce a cardboard game than a fully pre-painted miniatures game. Let people use the miniatures if they want to. That could be a thing. I know some people have done Star Wars Rebellion like that, where they've swapped in miniatures for the leaders, which are normally cardboard standees, and things like that. But again, that's getting a little far out there, but I wanted to at least bring something like that up as another possible option for X-Wing and Armada. What if there's a big change to how those games are going to be moving forward? I don't know if that's really what's going to happen or not. Again, this is all speculation on my part. But the speculation there is to round up, going back to my initial point, that there could be some big changes coming to X-Wing and Armada, and that might be why they can't really talk about it. If, for example, if I had Armada and it was going to go to another studio, I probably couldn't be talking about the future of Armada right now, because if I expect it's going back to Fantasy Flight, or if I expect it's going to Z-Man, or if I expect it's going, to Kickstarter or Game, or not Game Genic, but Ghost Galaxy, like Keyforge did, right? If I expect something like that is going to happen to one of my properties, I'm probably not going to talk about the property. There might be contracts that are being signed that forbid me from talking about something like, hey, I'm going to buy this game from you, but I need to have assurances that you're not going to badmouth the game after money has changed hands, right? Like so. Again, all speculation, but they're all signs of something is probably coming for X-Wing and Armada in the form of a big update or big statement or big news announcement. Maybe at the same time, maybe at different times, but I think we can expect something. And I think that's my big takeaway really from the interview is it feels like this is a decision that's probably a little bit above AMG's, like maybe even out of their hands. That obviously they're part of it, that they're like, hey, we're going to follow the rules and we're not going to be able to talk about these games until we can. But I think that doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing it to spite us. They're not doing it out of anger. They're not trying to like poke at the community and be like, let's see how mad we can get them. I don't think that's the case at all. And that was one of the things that was pretty much talked about plainly. Now, that may not do a lot to satisfy or satiate people who out there who are very thirsty for more content. I'm very thirsty for more content, although I have grown a little more patient over the past couple of years because, well, we've had no choice but to do so. However, I am optimistic that something interesting is coming, and I think I am personally at about the point where any news is going to probably be seen as good news, even if that news means the game is finally sunsetting, because it allows us as a community to move forward. And I feel like I'm ready for that, and it could be an interesting challenge. But I think there's better things that I would like. I think for me, the best bet, and I want to hear what you guys think. What would your what would your best option be? Is a better way to put it. What would you really love to see realistically? Would you love to see AMG saying, hey, you know what, we're going to just release ships now. We've got the approval, pre-painted, or maybe ships on a sprue, or maybe an options of both, maybe one being more expensive than the other, so you can kind of cater to your needs. I do expect whatever happens, prices are going to go up, though. Inflation is hitting everybody all around the world. And the fact that like a Imperial Star Destroyer was like MSRP'd at like $50 when honestly, nowadays, that should probably be $100 minimum based on how fast other prices are rising. I can see why they're probably not pushing this game as much, because the prices are probably too low and they're probably not making as much when you compare them to other games. Look at Star Wars Unlimited, for example. You know, it's a card game and it's selling like wildfire, and it probably costs pennies to produce each booster pack. So then you're selling them for like $4 or $5 a pack. You 10,000% profit every single time. Versus Armada, which is like maybe 20% profit or something along those lines. So I expect prices will go up no matter what happens, and that may be part of why they're not allowed to talk about it yet. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. My preferred solution would probably be that those games end up going to a company in a very, in an amicable way. Like, free AMG up to focus on, the games that they seem focused on right now, which are Legion, Shatterpoint, and MCP. And then let X-Wing and Armada go to a studio that maybe really needs a little bit of love and has the people on board and the resources to get those the reprints done, maybe a little faster, get some new content, get some developers out there, maybe points rebalancing. Maybe that comes with a new edition. I say second edition for Armada, or a third edition for X-Wing, or an official restart for those. And if so, hopefully it's done in a way that like GW does their editions, where you don't have to buy a single new miniature, you don't have to buy a conversion kit. The rules will be free online for the first year until maybe a new rule book or something like that. But basically make it a seamless transition into like a new rule set that uses all of your exact same components. That would probably work out really well. Or they just keep it going the way it is. I'm not convinced that Armada needs a second edition right now. X-Wing could probably use a revamp, but I don't know. That's a lot to ask of a community that's already gone through like 3 or different rule sets in the past 5 years or so, 5 or 6 years. It maybe more than that, maybe 7 years. But it's been a lot. It's been a lot of really big sweeping overhauls to X-Wing, and I think it might be a big ask to ask them to learn an entirely new rule set, unless you were to make it an amalgamation of previous rule sets, like only throw out 1 or 2 things that aren't popular with the community and bring back, 1 or 2 things that were popular with the community. Like maybe, I don't know how the larger community as a whole feels about Road, like maybe there's enough believers now, but that's some interesting things. I don't know what you guys would do. And if you're an X-Wing player and you're watching this video, let me know what you would want to do about X-Wing in the comments below as far as the rules. If X-Wing were to go to a new company, how would you want the rules to be? Would you want them to stay at the 2.5 state that they are right now, with the friendly bumping and being able to do a red focus after you bump? Or would you rather go back to like 2.0? I think 2.0 was largely the most popular. I particularly really liked 1.0 with only a handful of little complaints, but I was very used to 1.0. And of course, you can't really go exactly back to 1.0 because so many cards have been redone, but maybe there's some kind of in between that's probably going to be closer to 2.0. So I think that probably would be the best thing, is to go back to 2.0 and maybe revert points back to like 2.0 levels, so you actually had some incentive to take generics again. That's something that I would really like to see in the game as well. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. We also have a lot more to talk about, and I'm going to talk probably tomorrow. We're going to talk about Legion, because I think there's some big news for Legion, while there were some interesting things talked about, I feel like Legion might be getting a new edition. We're going to talk about that in the next video, so stay tuned. I will talk to you guys later. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are out of this world. If you are interested in supporting the channel, there's links to Patreon down below. You'll also get your name in the credits depending on the level that you've chosen if you're interested in supporting the channel. And there's also Discord privileges for patrons as well. Definitely appreciate that. Can definitely use the help. I want to thank you guys so much. I will talk to you later. May the force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes. The spice must flow, and always wash your socks.